Good afternoon. Welcome back to Senate Education. Our last couple of things, we have Ledge Council from now until 3:55 to do S66. We'll always have you back if we don't finish it, but I don't want to talk about anything else because I want to make sure that we get to as much as we can. So the floor is yours.
I appreciate your sensitivity to my timing
problem.
issues. Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. You should have S66 linked on your website and in front of you, and the as introduced version. Is that accurate? Okay, great.
Yeah.
So what I think would be useful is to start with a very brief orientation of where we stand today as the current law, and then a very high level overview of what S66 proposes to do. And then I can go into as much detail or back off at your direction. Does that sound good? Okay. So under today's, so we're going to be talking about the provision of education in the state of Vermont and what happens when a school district does not have a brick and mortar school for the grades for which they are organized. Under current law, if a school district is organized to provide education for certain grades, they got to provide that education. If they do not have a school, a public school, that they maintain and operate for those grades, they have two options under, well, they really have three options under current law. One option is they could open their own public school. But the options we're going to talk about today are they can tuition their students to the public school or approved independent school of the family's choice. That's what we all have been calling the town tuition program. Or they can designate for high school only, not elementary, for high school only. They can designate up to 3 either public schools or approved independent schools to serve as the public high school of their school district. If the school district goes with the designation option, those are the only schools those children, the children in the non-operating district can attend, subject to there is a process in current law and in S66 for a parent to petition the school board and say, these schools are not meeting the needs of my child. I would like my child to go somewhere else. That option aside, under designation, the designated schools are the only options for attendance. All on the same page on current law? Okay. S66 proposes to do a number of things. The first thing it proposes to do is do away with the tuition option. So under S66, it makes designation the only option for a school, a non-operating school district to provide education for the grades for which it's organized. And the schools that are eligible for designation, the first page 2, creates a new statute in chapter 21, which is the chapter that we talk about the town tuition program living in. It creates a new section there that outlines what kind of schools are eligible for designation. So on page 2, line 9, public schools in Vermont are eligible for designation. On line 10, public schools located outside of Vermont in a different state are eligible for designation. Or 3, an independent school recognized under section 166 of this title that meets at least 3 of the following 4 criteria. And I'm going to stop there because the kind of last big thing this bill proposes to do is relevant to this section. And so this bill also proposes to do away with the approved independent school designation process, the whole kit and caboodle. What it does is proposes that private schools are regulated as recognized independent schools only, and keeps the same law and the same criteria for recognized independent schools that is in current law in F66. It just gets rid of the approved independent school approval process. So turning back to page 2, line 11. So we've got public schools are eligible for designation in Vermont and out of Vermont in a different state. And independent schools recognized under section 166. Section 166 is the section in Title 16 that in current law sets out the approved independent school process and the recognized independent school process. S166 gets rid of the approved process. And so that recognized independent school has to meet 3 of the 4 following criteria in order to be eligible for designation. First criteria is line 13 on page 2. The recognized independent school serves as a regional CTE center as defined in section 1522 of this title. Line 15, the recognized independent school is established through the granting of a charter by the Vermont General Assembly. Line 17, the recognized independent school qualified as a public school under the definition of public school in effect on June 30th, 1991. Under subdivision 11A7 of this title. I have included what that language looks like, and we can go over that if you want, but you do have that in your materials for today. And then on page 3, the last criteria is that on line 1, the recognized independent school is designated under section 1935 of this title as an employer of teachers within the meaning of Title 16, Chapter 55, which is the State Teachers Retirement System chapter in Title 16. Under this chapter, there is a provision in current state law that allows for the board that manages the State Teachers Retirement System to designate certain approved independent schools as eligible to participate in the Vermont State Teachers Retirement System with current law. So in under S66, if the school is recognized by the state board and it meets 3 out of 4 of these criteria, it would be eligible for designation along with public schools. So those are the kind of big picture policy changes here. I will say there is a transition section at the very end of the so there is a transition contemplated. It's the very last section before the effective date section. And a large chunk of this bill is conforming amendments through all of Title 16 and the rest of the Vermont statutes annotated, because approved independent schools are sprinkled throughout. So those conforming changes are a mix of erring on the side of technical, just eliminating the word approved independent school. And then there's also the ones that are more policy driven, where perhaps the term recognized independent school is substituted for approved independent school.
Senator Weeks.
Yeah, just 2 questions. One, on page 2, line 10. So I believe the intent there is this is a neighboring state, not just any state. Was there any conversation from the
Well, Senator Doolittle is here. She can answer that.
what
line are you on?
Yeah, page 2, line 10. The public school located outside of Vermont in a different state. Was the intent a neighboring state? Was the intent really any state? That if family-
Any state.
and
I'm pretty sure.
California.
California,
Yeah, I mean, we could ask the person
no,
who wrote
just-
the bill, but I'm quite sure, yeah.
and then second, the line 11, which starts on line 11. Obviously, there's a target there. They're excluding something, and I'm not well versed enough in Vermont education law to understand what's purposely being excluded. Is that something you can comment on, or is that just something I need to discover?
I'd like to back up and address your first comment and then your second question. So your first question about public, the line 10 there, subdivision 2. You guys are gonna get so sick of me saying this, but I cannot answer in 10 questions. That is an answer that either you as a committee or your colleagues need to mention.
That's fair.
So I would encourage you to have the sponsor of the bill or sponsors of the bill in to speak
Senator
to
Doolittle
intent.
is here. She's
I am a
sponsor.
sponsor,
She's a
yeah.
sponsor, so she can help with some of it.
But the plain language, the plain meaning behind this language, there is no, it just says outside of Vermont in a different state. There's no limiting
Okay.
geographical
Okay.
language there.
Yeah.
Intent will be for you to breathe life into.
Sure.
And then your second question is again bordering on an intent question that I am going to again deflect for as far as the purpose behind it. And I will caveat what I am about to say with this is my understanding, and I would highly encourage the committee to take testimony on what this language does. I can tell you what it doesn't do, and it doesn't exclude anyone who meets this criteria. So if a school is recognized by the state board under the criteria in S-266, and it meets 3 out of the 4 criteria, there's no other limiting factors. My understanding is that currently today, the schools that I am aware of meet this criteria are what are colloquially known as the 4 historic academies. It is absolutely possible that there are other schools out there that meet this criteria, and I am just not aware of them. There will certainly be schools out there that meet some of these criteria, but not 3 out of 4.
Yeah, so further on that, so the 4 historical, forgot the last part of the academies, thank you, are covered in section C or section D or section B?
Are you talking about section 1 of the bill on page 2?
Yes.
So those criteria, schools that meet 3 out of 4 of those criteria, it's my understanding that given the current lay of the land, it's possible that it's only the 4 historic academies.
Right, so my question is a little different. I'm just wondering, those 4 historical academies are essentially covered under, because again, I don't know the language of subdivision 11A 7 before June 1990. I just don't know.
So are you asking me which school meets which criteria? Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm asking, I guess I'll rephrase the question, that are the 4 historical academies covered under on page 2, line item 15, or page 2, line item 17, or page 2, line item D, or all 3?
So they're not, I wouldn't say that they're covered by any of these. These are criteria that a school might meet. So this is not a definition. So it's not defining anything, it's eligibility criteria. And so that's why I was wondering if you were asking, like, does a certain school meet a certain criteria? But if you're asking, yeah, I guess I'm just not quite clear on your question.
Did you want to add to that? It looks like you might have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say what Ms. St. James just said, which is that just as it turns out, the 4 historic academies fall under this criteria.
Which one? B, C?
Some of them multiple, and yeah, but at least 1,
Senator Hutchings.
or at least 3. Is that correct?
How many schools don't fall under these criteria? Do we have that information? Or should we wait?
I think so again, I just want to review, there is an agreement with the House that they are starting this process. They have the same bill. We'll continue to chip along at this a little bit, but really jump in after we see what the House does on it. As far as I know, anecdotally, a lot of schools would not, this fits the 4 academies right now that I know of, and that's it. I don't think anybody else fits those 3 criteria. So no other school in the state of Vermont, you can find this out, would fit those criteria.
I would really encourage you to take testimony
Sure, of
on
course,
that.
but from what the little bit that I've heard, and we will take testimony on it, and I think the House has started to also, no other schools would fit that criteria. Doesn't mean they couldn't change, I guess. I don't know how you could get a charter, at least right now. Okay.
I'll
yes,
have another
Senator Lewis.
question later.
No, I was just gonna say to follow up on Senator Sheen's question, I think it would be really helpful to have a list and or a map of our public schools, our private schools, our, just sort of like a visual,
Yeah, that's a good
an
idea.
infographic with, so we could see the lay of the land and the educational landscape.
Would you ask AOE for that? I think they have
I
that.
think they might. have
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Just a map of all the schools in Vermont would be great. Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to derail your introducing this, but can we get from the sponsor an idea as to what the goal of this is to accomplish? Just because I feel like that will guide as we're hearing the breakdown of all the provisions.
Absolutely. In the meantime, just because we don't have her right now, we do have Senator Gulick. So what is the goal as the co-sponsor, as a co-sponsor?
The goal, do you really want me to give my opinion on this?
Well, we just want, trying to get a sense.
Sorry,
of
I'm
the
not trying to
goal
put you
of
on the
it.
spot.
Yeah,
I just want
Putting me on the spot.
to.
Can I respin it?
Yeah.
So that every bill seems to address a problem. What's the problem?
Okay, I think we should probably be using our time with Beth, but that's fine. I'll speak to the way I perceive this bill, which is that across our country, public schools are under threat and from a multiple of arenas. Some of which I will not speak about right now, but I'd be happy to talk to you about it at another time. But everything from, folks who are getting on school boards who want to remove books from classrooms, who are not open to a variety of different kinds of people, LGBTQ folks, people of color, et cetera. We have all kinds of bias seeping into our school boards. We have books being pulled off of class shelves in libraries. The list could go on and on and on. It's verging on a crisis as far as I'm concerned from my lens. So this is a way to make a systematic shift in the way we look at education and making sure that our most vulnerable students are taken care of in a landscape that is healthy and robust. Fine.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I will just
Please.
note that I did provide the definition, what the definition looked like of public school back on June 30th, 1991. It's a printout from an act from 1991, Act 24, and it amended the definition of public school. And the drafting conventions were a little different then. So instead of language that was struck, you'll see an asterisk and then brackets. And the language between the asterisk and the bracket is what was current law that today would be struck out. And then the underlined language is the new language. And
Okay.
so on June 30th, 1991, public school was defined as an elementary or high school which is principally supported by public taxation or tuition payments derived from public funds. So that was the definition of public school.
Okay.
It was amended to, and now it's very similar to what we have now, an elementary school or secondary school for which the governing board is publicly elected. So there was a period of time in Vermont where if a school, if a school was principally supported by public taxation of tuition payments, it was derived from public funds, it was considered a public school. So that could have at that time included what we now think of as private schools.
Okay.
Any other, that was a very high level overview of kind of what
Yeah,
this
well,
bill
Jeff, we know
proposes
that
to
you
do.
have our commitment today, so we'll definitely have you back and others. And I'll talk to the chair of the House Committee as well as the pro tem to kind of get a sense of where things are, how we'll proceed. Any other questions for Beth at this point?
Great. Thank you all.
Very, very much.
Thank you.
We'll see you
Yeah,
tomorrow.
very helpful. Mr. Bennett.
Just so everyone knows, there are puppies at the State House. That's why we were late. So yeah. There's just puppies here.
Really?
Anyways,
Puppies having to do with,
Mari, Representative Portis' puppies.
really?
They're like therapy puppies.
Yeah.
Bring them into a
We
committee
could
that's
use them.
stressed.
Oh
Right.
my
Yeah.
gosh. that's a
Yeah.
good idea.
Bob Kinsey used to bring in chickens, baby chicks every year.
With that intro.
Yeah, well, so
Difficult to follow.
proficiency education.
Right. Hi, for the record, Jeff Van,
Yeah.
Vermont NEA.
And let me just tee this up a little bit more.
Sure.
Because it's interesting. And I don't think I'm the only one having these conversations, but when I go for coffee in Montpelier, and I said this to you, and even today, running into a family proficiency, I keep hearing concerns about proficiency education. We've heard them from some of our members that they're concerned with proficiency education. We're going to look at it in more detail tomorrow, but the miscellaneous education bill will likely have, whether we get voted out or not, the draft will have something in there about, some kind of study around proficiency education. Should we continue? We see that some states are saying, kind of maybe put on the brakes. What are you hearing in more detail from your members?
Okay, fair enough. So thank you for the introduction. I appreciate it. So PBGRs, the proficiency-based grading requirements,
Yeah.
are schools that were required to do them.
Yeah, they
Not
are
all-
required.
They are,
Yeah,
and
okay.
in some level, and so not all schools are doing it
Yeah,
that receive public money,
yeah,
to say it that way. And where it's being done and done well, I think there was a great, there's a little bit of a broken record here. There was a fair amount of professional development that led up to it. There are some
Yeah.
places where there was less than a lot of PD performed before it was done. And so people then, whether it be the staff, parents, students, were not as well informed as they could have otherwise been. So I think your notion of in the miscellaneous bill, education bill, having a study in there of some kind, it's always good to take a look at what you've asked people to do.
Yeah.
And see whether it's working for students primarily.
Yeah.
What you heard from your constituent and one of my members, Megan Morgan Puglisi, when she testified here a few weeks ago, she mentioned she had to keep 2 grade books.
That's right.
And that does not seem wise use of her time or her colleagues' time around the state who are doing that. And in large measure, I think that's because kids who are aspiring to college may, out of state, for example, may encounter schools where they're not so familiar with PBGRs. And they're left, the admissions officers, I guess, admission staff are left scratching their head. What is this? Something new, something different. How do I square that with kids from other states where there's an A, B, C kind of grading system? It's a different grading system. So that is of concern to parents who want their kids to do well. That's maybe what you're hearing in the coffee shop. Want them to go to the best college they can get into and can afford, and all those fun discussions that take place as parents will. And if they're seeing or sensing some problem with their child's ability to matriculate at a college that they think they could handle financially and academically, then that's of concern to them. And so I think that's what you're hearing. Now, we did poll our members in 2019 about PBGRs. And there's,
2019,
pardon me?
2019,
I think it was 2019.
before COVID.
Before COVID, yes, April of 2019. So pre-COVID, and fair enough. And things, I don't think I've heard much in the way of improvement or more noise about it. It was pretty noisy back then. People, and then the pandemic hit, and there were bigger problems. Probably.
Yeah.
So one of the things we heard from our members was, and I'm happy to share this with you. I may tailor it a little bit because some of the stuff is not relevant for this discussion, but 3/4 were not involved in the development of the plans. So that's a problem,
Yeah.
I would say, right? If you're going
Yeah.
to do something with staff and ask them to do something, you want to make sure they're involved at the ground level and get buy-in and
Yeah.
intimacy with the discussion. Half of our members didn't think there was adequate resources to implement the change. So that was a change that they didn't see it was resourced well. And a fifth said they didn't receive adequate, excuse me, a fifth said they received adequate professional development. It means 4/5 didn't in some level, in varying degrees on a poll, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And half of the members did not receive adequate training in the transition. So it was sort of, you know, you've got the build up and then as we evolve into it. So that there's room for improvement, I would say, for those schools that are doing it.
Just to confirm, every school is supposed to be, right?
I believe that's right.
I think that is,
but,
yeah.
but I'm not, you know, I don't,
Search.
there's nobody, I don't think there's any PBGR police out
Yeah,
there,
yeah,
right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's what
yeah,
I'm being candid with you, that,
okay,
and I don't believe all the schools, again, who are receiving public tuition dollars are doing that at all, or are required to do it.
yeah,
And so, there's a disparity in how it's being implemented,
yeah.
and a disparity in how it was rolled out. And I think that it's wise for you, I
Yeah.
would suggest in the miscellaneous bill to take a look at that and
Yeah.
see whether it's working for families and students primarily.
The other thing, do you have any sense from members around that college time, whether or not, you know, because it's a different grading system, if you decided to all of a sudden switch to college, I mean, is this causing any problems with admissions? Do you know anything about that?
That's a little bit out of my bailiwick.
Yeah,
And-
yeah.
And so, I don't know, but what I hear anecdotally is probably what you do is people are concerned about, is a 3 on my child's report card
Yeah,
equal to a student who's in some other state who's got an A.
yeah.
And if you're an admissions officer, how do you equate a 3 with an A or a
Is it
B?
3 good?
It's 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right.
And 3 is meeting the standards, 4 is doing well above.
Okay, yeah, Senator Gulick.
How much is, if you, I don't know if you can answer this, but how much is the pushback that I sometimes hear against PBGR, just a resistance to change, and how much is actual legitimate concern? And if you can answer that.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll generally and anecdotally say that people are reluctant for change. Change is hard. I've been doing this for 20 years, and all of a sudden you're gonna tell me I'm doing it different. I was doing it wrong for 20 years. That's, and the other notion is that to the earlier question, what problem are we trying to solve here?
Mhm.
Now, the idea was the flexible pathways to get more kids into places where they could excel and exceed in their expectations and our expectations of them. Let's offer that. But I think that change is hard for students. Change is hard for families. I mean, I grew up, you had a number of grades.
Yeah.
And so I'm dating myself a bit on that, but we understood where we were, and the kids didn't, as it rolled out, what I heard was that they weren't understanding where they were relative to their classmates, relative to where they were, and relative to the curriculum in front of them. And it may take time. Change is hard and it's often takes, but it was designed to not measure. It was designed to measure student success along the road, if you will, and it's in a constant effort to improve. That's the goal.
Is proficiency-based learning or evaluations of that learning, is this a unique Vermont program, or is this adopted by?
My understanding is it is out and about in the nation with varying degrees of implementation. I think that to Senator Gulick's question about change, there are some early adopters, some medium adopters, and some late adopters of change. And I think what we're seeing is some people saying slow down. naturally. And I think that's what, you're naturally hearing some of that. And I think that's the noise I hear. Is let's stop, take a look and see what's going on here.
Thank you.
Well, can you just give us a sense of how this actually works? Is it you're just tested over, I mean, that's what.
I'm not a
some parents say.
teacher,
Yeah,
and
but you represent teachers.
I do,
Yeah.
but I'm not a teacher, so I don't know, this is, you're digging way into their actual business of how they work day to day. My understanding is it gives students more opportunity to show mastery in a topic. So you might be, of course, center champion. You might get it right off the bat and need no
5 times.
additional work. I, on the other hand, might have needed 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 efforts, but in all seriousness, I mean,
No, that's helpful.
it's designed so if you want a one-day assessment, you take a one-day assessment.
Yeah,
You're one place, everybody else is a different place.
yeah.
This is designed to make sure that that everybody in the classroom, assuming we're a classroom just for the sake
Yeah.
of argument here, gets to where the teacher thinks we all need to be.
Yeah.
And we master the subject matter at that point. May take you a week, 2 weeks, maybe a lot longer, all those sorts of fun
Okay.
things.
Okay.
And that's differentiated instruction, right? Teachers are supposed to differentiate
Yeah.
their instruction to meet the needs of individual students, because we all arrive at the classroom door a little bit differently situated.
Yeah.
Not easy,
No.
but it did go well in some places, I will say that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and I would attribute that to PD.
Yeah.
People having a lot of buildup with
Yeah.
staff,
Yeah.
with families, with students, so that when they switched, everybody knew what was expected of them. And that's probably a good model for most things that we do when we make change, whether it's in a classroom or a work setting or even in this building.
Can you just email Hayden a couple names of schools where you feel like you've heard it's gone really well?
Sure.
So when we do get into it, we can just hear from them as well.
Okay.
And potentially the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, we can.
Well, you heard from Megan Morgan Puglisi, and I would say that I don't think I wasn't here, didn't hear her, didn't hear your exchange, but I assume she was not thrilled by it because that
I
might,
thought you were here. Yeah, you were here.
I think Colin was.
Oh, really? Okay.
I think I missed that
But
one.
yeah, a couple other people
But
also, that would be great.
Yeah.
People that- Your members that really are concerned about it.
And you wanted ASAP.
Well, we're gonna look at language, we're gonna move this in 2 weeks, we'll have a vote to move it out in a little approach, but so sometime in the next couple of weeks.
Can do. I'll get you a copy of this redacted a little bit, cleaned up.
Anything else for Mr. Fannin? Okay, great,
Thank you.
thank you, perfect timing.
There she is.
Hey.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know. Ms. Pelham,
Yes,
how are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
Good, good to see you.
Likewise.
Invitation.
I know, it's very exciting.
And Ms. Bishop, do you want to both come up at the same time?
No,
No?
no.
Okay, all right,
Well, I mean, we could, but
whatever you want.
I have a
Why
couple.
don't you go do
Yeah.
that
Okay.
then, and then I'll
If that's all
follow
right,
up.
and then
Yeah.
maybe we can join together
Yeah,
afterwards.
that'd be great.
So welcome to Senate Education. Yeah, we have your slide presentation. This came out of some questions that we had from the college and universities, and then Senator Weeks was asking some questions about the Vermont brand. And what we're wondering is, with our friends in economic development and appropriations, how are we marketing our interest is, we'd love for this to be the place to go to college. The state to go to college and stick around, come and stay in Vermont because you can get the options, such a wide range, Middlebury, UVM, Goddard, and everything in between, our state colleges. And so, but related to that, we thought we'd also just try to understand the brand a little bit. I mean, we feel it, we live it, but we'd love to get your perspective. And I serve on Senate Ag in the morning, which also talks a lot about the brand as it relates to maple and dairy and just the landscape. So any thoughts you have would be greatly appreciated.
I would be happy to. And so for the record, my name is Heather Pelham. I am the Commissioner of the Department of Tourism and Marketing. And again, thank you. I don't think I've spoken to this committee before, so it's exciting. I did think, if you don't mind, I thought it would be helpful. You have just a couple of slides in front of you. They're really just visual aids, but I just thought it might be helpful if I could just give you a little bit of context on the Department of Tourism, since I haven't been in the committee before. I think it might be helpful just to ground our conversation as we get further into the brand. So, our mission, broadly, well, maybe I should, let me step back 1 second, since I haven't met you folks before. So I've been the commissioner for about 3 years. Previous to that, I was the chief marketing officer for the state of Vermont. So I've actually been within the Agency of Commerce for 10 years. Chief marketing officer is really an internal role that provides marketing expertise and communication support to other state agencies, whereas the Department of Tourism, it's much more outward facing, promoting the state broadly. So that's where I was just going to mention that. So Department of Tourism Marketing, we are looking outside of our borders, promoting the state for visitation, and then also more recently have expanded that role to relocation as well. But in terms of just when it comes to tourism, just so folks know, in a typical year, we welcome over 13 million visitors to the state, and that adds up to 3.2 billion in economic activity. So that's just some high level facts for you guys to think about. So that visitor spending supports 10% of our workforce, so over 30,000 Vermonters, and that's about the same number of jobs as in manufacturing. So again, just for context, that tourism behind manufacturing is the second larger contributor of out-of-state dollars, and bringing in 387 million in tax revenue. And I just say that just again for context in terms of the industry that we are supporting and the work that takes to support that industry. So I guess one other point I would make, just to kind of bring home the point, is that the visitor economy that we're supporting that reaches all corners of the state. So I like to say that tourism is rural economic development, because when visitors come here, they're not just staying at our ski resorts or at the lodge where they may literally be putting their head in the bed, but they're going to our restaurants, they're going to our downtowns, they're buying gas at the local convenience store, and that really does reach all corners of the state. So in terms of just the unique impact that tourism has and the visitor economy, I would say it can't really be understated.
Thank you, Chair. Did you say that this is the second largest income generator in the state from out of state?
Out of state dollars.
And what's the first?
Manufacturing.
Thank
Unless that's one. Correct me on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it is, I would say, not to be underestimated or taken for granted. And I'm not suggesting that folks do, but it has a huge impact on our state. And again, 10% of our workforce. Okay, yeah.
What's your budget?
I was going to get to that. Our base budget is $3.5 million. So, our role.
I'm the chair again.
But I'll come back to that. So, our role is to promote the state, to capture interest, to capture attention and, create interest to fuel all that economic activity. And so we work at the very top of the marketing funnel. If you folks are thinking about the marketing funnel, we're trying to get people's attention, get them interested, inspired, and then they kind of work their way down. But we are not selling any particular product or activity, but we're selling the idea of Vermont. And so we focus on broad brand awareness campaigns to keep filling that funnel with new visitors and to nurture that brand affinity to keep Vermont top of mind for folks. And then I would also just make the point that we're here to kind of elevate brand experiences to a larger audience than any one entity or any one region could do on their own. So we're really taking all of those iconic brand experiences that other regions or other attractions and so forth are creating, and we're trying to get them in front of the largest audience possible. So I would say that when it comes to talking about the Vermont brand, it's important to remember that the brand doesn't come from the top down. It really comes from the bottom up. So that, when visitors come to Vermont, like every interaction they have becomes part of the brand to them. Every time you hear Vermont on the news or you see it in a movie or, any friends and family, when they talk about Vermont, all of that, like the brand is that cumulative experience of all of those touch points. It's that sort of residual impression that you have in your head of any product or place. And it comes from all different areas. So I just think it's important for us to remember that when we think about like people's experience with the brand, it's not that necessarily we are in control of that at the state level,
Yeah.
but it's everybody, everybody is responsible for Vermont brand. It's every interaction that a visitor has when they're here that becomes part of their collective memory of what Vermont is. But we then nurture that brand affinity, and that might start when they're here in college. It might start when they're visiting friends or family or on vacation, clearly.
So would you consider one of the bottom-up elements to be universities?
I would, absolutely.
But would it be currently reflected in your branding?
Well, to some extent, I would propose that it doesn't really matter where that first kernel of an idea comes from. It's really more like, what does that add up in a person's mind? So certainly we would hope that if folks are coming here to college, they have a positive experience. Obviously positive for their, for their career and their personal development, but that that's one of the reasons why they chose Vermont, hopefully, for outdoor recreation or so forth. And so then we can continue to kind of nurture that and hopefully keep them in the pipeline, so to speak. But to some extent, I would say it doesn't really matter in terms of promoting visitation or even relocation. I mean, everything helps, but that first, there's like no wrong door. Think of it that way. Like it's if somebody comes here on vacation first, or they come here to college first, or they just come to a wedding here first, it's really then our job just to keep promoting Vermont once they have that first touch point. If that helps to answer the question. And so, I guess I just wanted to just mention that, we do see that the tourism industry has a really special part in supporting that brand. I mean, good hospitality is about making people feel welcome. It's, sharing what it is that we love about Vermont with everybody else. It's supporting that tourism infrastructure, whether it's like our local restaurants or so forth, that, when we support that infrastructure, that's supporting kind of the fabric that we all enjoy as well. I like to say that, we want to be able to go out to dinner on a special occasion, it takes out-of-state dollars, a lot of times to keep that restaurant operating year round. So it's available when us as residents want to appreciate that asset as well. I did include in the packet, and I don't have the screen up now, but just some example of our creative, just to give you guys, some idea. Travel certainly kind of sets the tone. And when the current campaign we're running is called A Place All Its Own. And I can just, read you one of our campaign lines is, Vermont is a place unlike any other, where life is better when you slow down, look around, and simply take notice. Vermont can inspire, restore, and bring you to a whole new state. And so we don't have to, I can talk for hours about creative and tactics and so forth, that I know that's not, but I just wanted to give you a taste of that. And then if you do look at the PDF, there's a link to a video that we helped create last summer, which I just think it's, it's always easy, other people can say things better than you can sometimes. And it's just a really interesting story about a family who was doing this cross-country adventure. The father, Keenan, is actually from Vermont. So when they came back home, just what it meant to come back home and to share the, Vermont experiences that he remembered as a kid with his children and so forth. So just as a flavor, I just wanted to include that. So then back to the budget, and I'll kind of wrap up here because I know we want to give Betsy time and so forth. But yes, our base budget is 3.5 million, and that is all in salaries and so forth. So that gives us about $2 million in terms of kind of working capital for paid advertising in a year. And tourism is a competitive business, so just again, for context, New Hampshire's budget is 10 million and Maine's is 17 million.
And ours again is
3.5, yeah. And, as you can imagine, it costs us the same amount of money to put an ad in Boston as it does for New Hampshire or Maine. So our base funding does keep us at a competitive disadvantage. I mean, we certainly do the best that we can with that. And again, I know we're not talking appropriations here, so there's more to that.
But we're talking with appropriations, we're talking with economic development folks, and we're talking in this in education. We do. I mean, to be honest, we've got some heavy things going on here, not only with higher ed, but there is a bill that would change even school choice in this state dramatically. And so all these things really are issues because they're also all economic development issues. And even in this, you look at the kingdom in particular. why certain people move to certain towns, Jen Kishel might tell you why people move to St. John's. I mean, all those things are definitely interconnected.
They
So it
are.
is, and we're trying to communicate with our colleagues, more effectively, I'd say.
And
Know
that's
what we're hearing.
music to my ears. I mean, I think that's great. And just understanding, kind of where tourism fits in and how it can fill that role of continuing to tell the
Yeah.
state's story in so many different ways. I mean, I mentioned at the beginning, our charge, I mean, it was always there, but like we have been spending more and more time thinking about relocation and how do we, knowing that folks have this continuum they go through if they think about relocating to a place, it is going to be based on, usually it's based on an affinity that was there that was then nurtured. I mean, some people might just come out of the blue, but more likely they've had some experience in Vermont and they want to know what it's all about. We have never had a budget to do that. And so actually in the governor's recommended budget this year, there is a base increase for the Department of Tourism to actually put more money into relocation marketing. So again, thinking about it in the context of everything you guys are talking about, we recognize that marketing is all about repetition. It's about touch points, about staying top of mind. It takes money. It takes money over a concerted period of time. And so, relocation, workforce, all these things, it is so important. And so what I try to say is like, I can show you what we've done for tourism. We've spent generations investing in tourism, and it takes time to create that, like, again, that residual idea in folks' minds. And if we want to expand that to relocation, we're all in. Like, we would love to do that, but it takes time and it takes resources. And the reason why someone comes here on vacation is not necessarily the same reason they come here to relocate. There might be parts of it, but it's different. It's potentially a different audience. It's maybe different tactics. It's not like you can just add one more thing on. But our higher education system, our education system in general, yes, that is part of our story. That is part of what we have to offer. That's part of the quality of life that we, are promoting to folks. But how we talk about that and how broadly we can talk about that, it is a resource-driven conversation. Not that to say everything comes to resources,
Just to give you an example,
Yeah.
Everywhere you go in the city of Boston, in a lot of cities in the United States, you see a Southern New Hampshire University sign.
Okay.
Their budget is, I think, it is millions
Yeah.
just for marketing.
Yeah.
And I think our state colleges have it's that kind of just difference. It's huge. So, Senator Jewett.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
We are working on a school construction bill, because one of our thoughts is that if we can redo our school buildings across the state and really form an incredibly strong and robust public school system, it will really draw people in to live and work here, which I know is different from tourism, but in terms of bringing people in and keeping them, that's what we're hoping for.
And I think that's wonderful. And I will also say that, one of the best forms of marketing is to improve the product. So you're improving the product. That's wonderful. But if nobody knows that, then you're just not doing as much as you could do to get to that final end point.
Right. Once we start the building, we will make sure that we have a social media campaign that talks about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to get over the shock of your budget, given what we spent on our congressperson's recent campaign and Bucksboro Kids campaign. It's just, it just pales in comparison. Anyway, my question.
Still make an amendment for the BAA. If you want to.
No, I think we're already 90 million over where we.
Well, I would be remiss in not mentioning that coming out of the pandemic, there was a part of ARPA funding that was specific to travel, tourism, and outdoor recreation. So the state is getting a big number, $10 million to support travel, tourism, and outdoor recreation in the next few years.
For marketing or for?
We can use it for marketing. We cannot use it for relocation. So that's one reason why we're not asking for an increase in tourism funding as we have done many years before. So it gives us an opportunity to really show what we can do when we have a budget, because we know those sort of chicken and egg conversations, like what would you do? How would you do? Like, can show you this is what we can do. This is how the science of marketing works. I think this is how we can set metrics and benchmarks and really show that return on investment. So the conversation may not be today about tourism funding, but it is never going to go away. And it's never too soon to start that conversation, really think about what will it take for us to really nurture this industry that is bringing in so much revenue that then is available to this body to fund other initiatives.
Spend money to make money.
Yeah.
So my question,
Yeah.
what platforms are you on in your campaign?
We have a huge mix, I would say. So those are just a couple examples of digital advertising. So digital advertising is, banner ads that pop up when you're doing everything else you're doing online, search marketing, you check into Google, I'm interested in this, social media. When we can, we do out of
Social media.
social media just
Like what-
being, so we think of it, so when I would say.
Senator Weeks is on TikTok, for example. Could he?
So I think social media is both just keeping a presence there. So we talk about earned, owned, and paid media. So owned media is the things that we say about ourselves. So that would be on social media, that would be our website. It's where we control the message. Earned media is what other people say about us. So we're gonna also want to nurture PR and make sure that we're bringing journalists here and things like that. And then there's paid media, which is we pay people to say things about us. So when it comes to social media, it's both owned is what we're saying. We're keeping a good presence out there. We're spreading our message, visually and otherwise. And then we can also boost that message to reach a greater audience. So within paid tactics, social media is part of paid. We also do, video pre-roll, connected TV, those kind of paid advertising. Print is not dead, regional travel publications, and then online travel platforms. When we have the budget, we do out of home. We were able to do a campaign this summer in the New York City market that was partially to promote tourism and also partially to promote the new line extension of the Amtrak train to Burlington. We have done some. The New York market is a great one for us because we're not competing as heavily with Boston because we're just that much, we're closer from New York. So it's just a great way for us to make an impression. And I just throw that in there. I would say another really big part of what we do is sponsored content. So what that is that we work with other publishers to write stories about us. So for instance, this last summer, we worked with Outside Magazine and their family brands includes Backpacker, Clean Eating, Yoga Journal, and so forth. So, we're working with other publishers to create stories about Vermont.
That's helpful. Thanks.
Ms. Bishop, want to come on up and you can stay in the stone, whatever you want to do.
Either ways.
Yeah.
Heather and I work quite a bit together, so that's fine. Betsy Bishop, I'm with the Vermont Chamber of Commerce. Good to meet some of you. I haven't had the opportunity and some old faces that I enjoy working with. So thanks for having us. It's an interesting conversation, thinking about tourism marketing, thinking about the small budget. I'm going to start, there's so much to talk about here, but I'm going to try to turn the conversation from the tourism space more to the space around workforce and bringing people to live and work here, to go to college here. At the beginning of the session, we all received an email from us with our top 3 priorities. And I'm sure along with everybody else's, you read them and committed them to memory. Just as a refresher, in case you didn't, our top priority is housing, workforce, and advancing Vermont's economy. Those are the 3 things that we're working on probably forever, not just this year. But around the workforce piece, you all have heard the demographic story of Vermont, that we have an aging population, that due to the pandemic, we have seen a huge increase in the amount of folks not participating in the workforce in Vermont, and that we have a huge workforce problem here. Usually when I say that to any group of people, somebody's hand shoots up and says, you know what we should do? If we could just keep more of our college kids here, it would solve the problem, right? And this is where this attaches to this conversation that you're having. That myth has been dispelled. There are not enough college students in this state to fix the workforce gap, even if you forced all of them to stay. About half of them stay, Even if the other half stayed, it's only 5,000. The other half is only 5,000. So it's just not going to fix our workforce problems. Having said that, I don't think anybody really wants to force anybody to do anything in that realm. So we have these discussions frequently. How do we market all the good things that we're doing in Vermont? And we think about that in the tourism space, because tourism is the only place the state is putting marketing dollars into in a significant amount of money and sustained long-term commitment to show the results that Commissioner Pelham just talked about. The budget, $3.5 million, is paltry. The amount of employees you have is 7, 8, 9. Or more, maybe.
We actually have 12, it includes the CMO's office.
So 12 employees to do that work. To think about a sustained effort for attracting people to come here to live and work, that's what we're talking about. Come here to live for 4 years in college, come here to live here for all the things that we need to do. We think that doing that in a yes, going to the appropriations committee and asking them for money this year, next year, and every other year for eternity. If we're talking about making a reputation for Vermont as a great place to live because we have a great public school system, you can spend all the money you want on that. You can have all the beautiful schools you want, but if you don't tell a single soul, they will never know. And you will be sitting here wondering, why did we spend all that money thinking people were going to flock here? I am in a conversation in almost every committee in this building about this. Betsy, we just passed an aspirational goal on childcare last year to have this 10%, so nobody spends more than 10%. In the lead up to that conversation, the conversation was, if we pass that, people will flock here because of that. My answer is not if you don't tell them. They're not going to flock here. We've done some amazing things to work on climate change in this building, that we have set goals, we are working toward goals. Vermont is a leader in that space. We're a leader in social justice, in environmental work ethic. We're a leader in all of these spaces. And we talk really a lot about it amongst ourselves, and we love it. That's why we're here. But we're not doing a good job of telling other people. It takes money and long-term commitment. So we have asked to start to think about adding to the Department of Tourism and Marketing's budget $1 million to try to work on that. Because if we just ask the Department of Tourism to dilute their message and talk about childcare and climate change and colleges and anything else, it won't work. That's not what building a brand is. We need to build a brand to have Vermont be a place that people want to come to, not just for 4 days, not just for a long weekend, but for a lifetime. And we saw a little spark of that, right? During the pandemic, we saw some of that. We need to think about bringing more people here, people overall, but specifically people who want to work in our workforce for all of those things.
Thank you, Betsy, for being here. And thank you, Chair. What was my question going to be? It's coming back to me. Rankings. We do well on a lot of rankings, it seems, or we have in the past. I know right now we're on some rankings that aren't very good. But do you find that is a good way of telling our story or getting our message out?
If we were to commit dollars and a commitment to it, I have no doubt that some marketing genius, maybe that would be Commissioner Pelham and her team, would be able to figure out what would be the most compelling story to do the things that we want to do. Rankings are funny. I can find as many rankings that say bad things about us as I can that say good things.
Okay.
I'm fond of thinking that we're the healthiest state and the smartest state, and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure somebody can do that and find bad rankings. If you're thinking about what makes a person move from point A to point B, it doesn't happen by seeing one thing and going, go anywhere outside of the state and ask people, tell people you're from Vermont. What do they say? Beer.
Maple,
Maple. Skiing.
progressive.
cheese, Bernie Sanders. Like, this is because this is years in the making, and this is our brand. These are all things we want to embrace.
Yeah.
They're all good things. But what you rarely hear is a work opportunity or, those types of things. And in order to put that on somebody's radar, it's going to take an effort to do that. And I think that we have those achievements. You folks who work in this building and pass laws every year to do good things for Vermonters. If we could only take your achievements and elevate them to a place where people outside of this state would know that, I think that's a worthy goal. And I think that there's an opportunity to do that. And I do think that it would be a compliment to our tourism message. It's not like these things are different. The audiences are slightly different. How many of you have met a tourist or had a guest stay at your house or whatever, and they're like, oh, I love it here, right? It is so cute. And then they often say, like, what do people do here, right? That's always like, that's where you want to capture them. They came here, they had a good experience here. They think like, could I live there? Like, haven't we all traveled and thought that, right? I come home to Vermont, so I can't possibly think that. But the point is that we don't have an answer for them, whether that's a tourist or somebody who's spent 4 years at college and maybe they left after college and went somewhere, but they still sort of have that heartstring for Vermont. How do we pluck on that and say, since you left, since you have this route in Vermont, maybe that's a summer camp route. Maybe it's a college route. There's lots of different things. People move. It takes a huge effort. They're not just flinging up and moving and moving and moving. It's a big effort. It takes time and thought. They move for family, number one, some sort of route or connection. They do move for climate, but like warmth, not climate change, although that may be changing. They do look for an affordable place to live, but they also want to be in a place that they feel sort of that camaraderie. What did you say, Commissioner Pelham? Her line, she was reading her line from the PowerPoint and said it's a whole new state. It sort of leads you to think like a whole new state of mind, but a whole new state. That could sort of be very complementary into this space to recruit people, to let people know that Vermont wants more people. We need more people to build houses. We need more people to go to college. We need more people to join in climate solutions, but we have to, we need in the workforce, but we need to tell them that we want them here.
Senator Weeks.
I just had a question going back to tourism for a second.
Yeah.
I don't want to jump. So I'm just wondering if the Department of Tourism maintains a metric of, I'm thinking of it as like a saturation point of hotels, theaters, restaurants, resorts. Like, do we track like how saturated we are each year on tourists coming in and occupying all those available spaces, all those available opportunities? Is that something that's,
I would say there is data available for instance, the lodging industry. We can get, occupancy rates and so forth.
not that you could, but that you do?
Well,
I'm just curious.
I guess I'm answering that saying that there's not that kind of data available in terms of like how full is any restaurant, let alone all the restaurants, and let alone how that translates up to us. We just don't have those mechanisms in place.
Okay.
So, we have anecdotal information. We work with the community level all the time to understand, what's new, what's coming, places opening, places closing. But, when we're looking at metrics, we're really trying to make sure that we are spending the dollars that we have very wisely. So looking at, return on investment that way. We're looking at just the marketing measure, like how many people are we reaching, how much time they spend with the brand. When I mentioned the sponsored content, a display ad may flash on your screen if you even look at it for a second or two. But if you're reading an article and it took you 5 minutes to read that article, we've captured your attention and you're thinking about Vermont for 5+ minutes. That's a lot of time to make an impression.
Okay.
And there is on the certainly in the lodging industry, we've seen quite a few building starts in lodging in Chittenden County. And each one of those, they do an effort of looking at sort of their competitors and that occupancy rate. It's a pretty high occupancy rate. So I think that that's something that certainly the lodging industry is quite knowledgeable about.
Okay, thank
And they do share that, so
Can we get you back?
anytime.
Yeah, that would be great. We would love to continue this.
Yeah.
We're gonna put some language like in the miscellaneous education bill related to marketing, and we'll talk to Senator Kitchell and Senator Ron Hinsdale about this.
Sure. One thought is over the last 2 years, 3 years now with COVID, there was funds being put in various places to help businesses, certainly in the first year or two when they were closed, right?
Yeah.
And most of those funds have been sent out to the various eligible businesses. To the extent that there's any funds left over in those business programs, we have been asking that it gets redeployed to business programs as opposed to redeployed to other needs in state government. And I think we're starting to see that come out again. And if that happens, finding $1 million from those unused business funds, this would, in our view, look at that as helping businesses to find more people, more workers.
Senator,
Thank you, sir. So just an aside, if manufacturing is number one and tourism is number two, where would higher education be? Is that?
Susan's gonna know more than I am.
I think we're third.
Do you?
Yeah, the third highest. in the
Okay,
state.
well, there you go. There's a synergy
Yeah.
to get, some
Yeah.
marketing support for.
I think I'd have to look at that. I'd love to get back to you. It may be that the tech industry seems to cut through lots of those industries as well. So there's a lot of folks when you look at that, but 1/3 of, when you think about the 30,000 people working in tourism or the 30,000 people working in manufacturing, that's, I don't know those numbers. so
And
that's
actually, we're talking about bringing in out-of-state dollars.
Right.
Yeah, and that's not what I was referring to.
right. So
yeah.
there's different metrics, right? Like how many people work in the industry, how many out-of-state dollars are brought in. And I think that's right. So that's what,
Okay, whatever is necessary to compare apples to apples.
got it.
Senator Hutchings?
Yeah, I just, as we're concluding the conversation, I just want to throw the point out there that, when the very first time I came to Vermont was, we were traveling through the state, making a few stops, but spending the day, or 2 days actually, in Burlington and at UVM, going around the town, and then on our way back down, stopping in a few different places. But after going to UVM and spending some time there, just visiting people and then checking out the rest of the state on the way back, there was this moment in my mind where I was like, all right, I don't know how but I'm gonna find a way to end up in Vermont.
That's
So
great.
Yay.
That's
And I
really
think
great.
that
Yeah.
is exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
You got that, like,
Yeah.
I love it. You established that route. And how do we get, when you think about the 13 million visitors that come here every year, I know without asking and surveying every single one of them, they had this great experience here.
I could
And
see
so how
Senator
do-
Hashim in a commercial.
I'm-
Saying
I'm
just
for hire.
that message.
Perfect,
Right.
perfect. But I think my point is like that you given them the root of that,
Yeah.
the touch of that with tourism. How do you turn that and capitalize that and turning them into a Vermonter
Yeah.
and letting them know that we want them to be more than just a tourist? We're not telling them that. We should.
We have to leave it there, I'm afraid.
Great.
That's-
Thank you
that's
so much.
in our office.